In this video, I am going to deal with the paperwork on my desk. I'm going to share with you my system, my process for resetting when my desk ends up looking like this. It's a buildup of ideas for school, for homeschool for next year, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, bills, miscellaneous papers for summer camps, all kinds of things in the last, I would say, 6 weeks have just escalated onto my desk to be dealt with later, and the pile just got magnetic. Clutter can be magnetic when we don't rely on our systems to keep us organized, as I have done when it comes to my desk lately. So this project ended up taking me about an hour and a half. I'm going to edit this video down to probably about 10 minutes. So I just want you to be aware that it wasn't a 10-minute project for me to be able to tackle this pile of stuff. What I am doing is actually removing everything that I want to deal with off of my desk. So I'm giving my desk a reset back to the way I want it, and I'm putting all of my paperwork, I'm gathering all my stuff onto the dining room table so that I can have the space to deal with all of the sorting categories that I need to do. As I was gathering things, I also was thinking of categories, of sorting categories. I knew I was going to end up as I started to process all of this paperwork. So that is the next thing that I did, was write down and brainstormed the categories that I knew I was going to start to sort in, but I needed it to be flexible and evolving because I was going to come across stuff that I didn't think of that I needed to set up new categories for. And the reason I wrote them down as brainstorming categories is that I wanted to be able to think through the end organization. Once I had sorted the piles, I wanted to be able to think through where I was going to keep that category in my home, how I needed to be able to access it in the future, and a way to make it easier for myself. It's early morning here in my house when I'm tackling this project. All of my children are still sleeping. I have 3 kids, and so I needed to be able to do a voiceover for this video. I didn't talk through my decisions or what papers I was going through specifically. I just knew that I wanted to film a video about paper and how I process it by gathering and brainstorming and sorting. So that's the step I'm on now. I do have a free printable on my website that you can have. I'll leave the link below in the description box that walks you through 9 steps of this process. I've truncated it for my particular project today, only because I have a system in place for storing long-term paperwork and bills. And then the extra things that I needed to sort through today were generally new things that I needed to address in my existing system, like all this paperwork that comes with being a Girl Scout leader that I took on a couple months ago, all the paperwork for Cub Scouts that I'm helping my husband with, some school planning that I'm doing for the fall. I have an area on my teacher cart that I could have stored those things, but my brainstorming for school was taking place at my desk. So it was an accumulation of stuff that didn't have a home in my existing system. And that's what I had to end up dealing with, and took the most time was figuring out the new puzzle pieces and reshifting the entire puzzle and the system to be able to account for the new categories in my paperwork organization system. Once I figured out a couple of initial categories for organization, my momentum picked up. That happens with most organization and decluttering projects. You start to figure out what your mini piles are, and then you can move a lot faster because you've designated an area to put that while you're sorting and organizing. So I ended up with keep individual piles like Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, bills, and then I had a trash pile and a shred pile. I had to write down the categories, the new categories, as I was going. I kept my brainstorming list front and center the whole time, so I could write new designations of things I needed to consider where their home was going to be after I finished sorting at this table. Because what I didn't want to do is sort all the piles, make an organized, chaotic mess, and then lose interest and not finish and just leave it on the table for another day. Sometimes my projects go that way, and that attracts more clutter. So seeing it through to the end is something I had to learn by decluttering time after time and organizing again and again through the last 5 years. So I have to know what my boundaries are, what my patterns are. And I knew I wanted to take this project through to completion and not leave a mess on the table. So I had to keep track of my categories written down as I went. And it's also early in the morning, so me trying to remember 15 different piles and categories was going to be difficult. So that's why I wrote it down. It's just my process. It's just how I do it. You may not need to do that when you're sorting paper, but it's just one way that I keep myself organized when I do these resets. I probably have to do this project once or twice a year when paper just builds up, either because we're just so busy or I stop using my own organization system and I get lazy and I throw things onto my desk for a later date. And then later becomes later and later and later, and I end up doing this. I actually find this a little therapeutic to be able to gather all these papers and organize them all in one shot because I don't know, I just find it cleansing to be able to reset a space like this and get it back to the way that I like keeping it. It's just part of my process, and especially early in the morning on my own, I have no interruptions. It's quiet. It's something I can really, truly wrap my mind around without any distractions. Stationery is a category that has a home, but ended up sorted in these bins on my desk. It has a little space in what we call our library room or our other school room. And that way, me, the kids, Andy, my husband, can write letters, thank you notes, that kind of thing. It all has a home already. This stack of stationery ended up in here. And that's just part of, living in a house with 5 people. Stuff happens and it gets disorganized, and then you take an hour and a half and you reset it and you're good to go. Pretty much any decluttering project that is of this magnitude, I find money in. I don't know where this miscellaneous cash comes from. I don't know if my dad just hides money, dollar bills and $5 bills and $20 bills, or if I don't know where this money comes from. The kids have envelopes. They're actually in this pile with their names on it, where they keep their gift cards and their cash. Their stuff is organized. I don't know where these random dollar bills and $5 bills come in anytime I do projects like this, but I find it, all over the place. I ended up finding $17 in this paperwork pile that I did not know we had. It's like a treat. It's like free money that was already mine. As with most big decluttering projects, I end up finding a hurdle or a roadblock or something that stalls me. And this was a piece of paper that I wasn't sure what to do with. It was something that really kind of needed my attention within the next couple of days. And it was something I didn't want to deal with today. But I also didn't want to file it away and forget about it. So this moment in my organization was when I started what I called a temporary pile. And this pile ended up having probably like 15 things in it of stuff that needed my attention in like the next 72 hours. And it all required, like, each piece of paper and each action from this temporary pile was like 10 or 15 minutes of my attention. And so there's a couple of hours that I needed to do something with. It was all things that required attention beyond several minutes. And for me to acknowledge that and create a pile of work that I had to dedicate time to was a realization kind of halfway through. And lately I've been realizing that's part of my clutter issue sometimes, is that I don't deal with it in the moment because it takes more than 5 or 10 minutes to deal with, and I save it for another time. And that's not what I want to do. So this self-recognition through these decluttering projects helps me know how I am and how I need to deal with things. And by making a temporary pile, I was able to create a hyper focus on things that needed my attention as soon as possible, like this week. And that helps me deal with the whole mound, to know that this section is something that needs my first focus, and the rest of it could take a focus next week. In editing, I cut out a bunch of stuff of just me sorting through papers, but I wanted to show you how the piles build up. But this was probably about 30 minutes that I edited out to be able to get to this point in progress. I debated cutting out this next part just because of the vulnerability and the emotion, but I came across a piece of paper that had my mother's handwriting on it. She had taken some notes about a game my son invented, and she wanted to make sure she was playing correctly, so she made herself some notes. And it was in the last couple months of her life. Her handwriting had changed, and at the time I didn't recognize it as a decline in her health, but now looking at it a year later, I can see the decline in her handwriting, and it had just struck me. Grief finds you. Sometimes you need a little nudge from a handwritten note, and sometimes it just wallops you from the side when you weren't expecting it. And I wanted to leave this in here because I received so much support in the last 2 years when my brother died and then my mother died, and so many of you reached out about your own mothers and your own siblings and how you were navigating grief and loss. And I found so much comfort in that. So I wanted to leave this moment in here because of that reason, so that anybody who is navigating grief, you are not alone. You don't have to be alone in it. And I hope that you know that I am experiencing it too, and that we are going through it together, even if we're thousands of miles away. I wanted to leave this moment in here for those folks who are watching it and need to cry with someone. Do that with me here. And it took me a good 20 minutes to wrap it together and get myself back into the project. So I'm going to edit that stuff out next. So I ended up with taxes and school. Those two things have a home already. So I'm just going to put those papers away. Whew. Yikes. This is a cabinet that's in sort of the end of our hallway before it goes into our kitchen. And this is where we keep life documents and taxes. This is a taxes folder. We've used this thing for like the entire time we've been married. That one manila folder is the current year's tax documents that we used to then prepare for taxes annually when we go to do that. And it's just kept in this cabinet here at the top of the stack. And the rest of that stack is prior year's taxes. This is a Fireproof, waterproof document bag. That's where I keep everybody's birth certificates, our marriage certificates, life and death documents that need a protected place. I can also grab that bag if we need to get out of the house in a hurry. And then we have 2 carts in our family room for school. And one is a teacher cart and one is the kids cart with all their stuff. And so I just decided to put all my planning stuff at the bottom of my cart because that's actually where I would look for it. If I was looking for things that I had already brainstormed and organized, that is exactly where I would look for it. It's already on the cart. So that's why I popped it there. The next, I had gathered all of my Girl Scout stuff into this blue bag, and I hung it in my closet because that is repetitively where I keep putting that bag. So all of my Girl Scout paperwork is in one spot in the closet. I didn't want to keep it at my desk. It was just too cumbersome. This is everything we use for bills and budgeting, so I put it in the drawer. That way, if Andy needs to access it, it's there in my desk drawer. If I need it, everything is in one spot. Then I moved on to my short-term temporary and my longer term temporary, but I don't mean longer term as in years, I mean as in like week or two. So I had 2 piles, one that required my immediate action, and by immediate I mean like I needed to pretty much deal with it today, and I created myself a to-do list from that pile. And then I had like one that I had to deal with next week, stuff that I didn't want to linger, but I had to deal with and then was going to become trash. It was like action things that were going to become trash. I had several envelopes with addresses that I needed to update my address book. I had some miscellaneous stuff that needed to require my attention and then could go in the trash. And then the other pile was my stuff I needed to deal with as soon as possible. And so I said a quick little prayer for strength to be able to get through that today temporary pile. These were things that required my attention today, and then I was going to put into the trash. And that's that pile of 10 or 15 things that I spoke about, that each thing was going to take me about 10 minutes. Okay. Now where does it go? At this point, I knew I needed to start getting ready for the day, and we were going to be gone out of the house for 4 hours sitting at gymnastics. So I had a pile that I was going to put into a bag to bring with me to gymnastics to process and deal with. I did that. This clear bin ended up going back on my desk, but it is one category. It is everything I use for video planning and blog writing. So I put that on my desk because that's where I do that. This bin was all trash. This was everything that was all accumulated with trash. And these were all of the categories that I ended up sorting today. And here is my desk after decluttering and organizing it. So on the far right, I have my bin of work stuff for the blog and for this YouTube channel. I have a letter my daughter needs to mail. And then this pile is my temporary pile that can be dealt with next week. This pile might be magnetic if I don't deal with it. But for today, it's great. Here in the description box, you will find a link to that free printable. And where I hung the Girl Scout bag is my hallway closet. It's also called our launch pad, where I have everything organized to get out of the house. I shared a recent video about how I do that and how I tackle that kind of clutter. And I'll leave a link here for you to watch that next. Hope you're doing well, and thanks for sharing part of your day with me today.